literally imagine like a 16 by 9.5 foot rectangle, and that was my studio and my home. So I got, sold a lot of just general possessions and comforts that a lot of people don't think they can get rid of. Like, there's no windows, there's no kitchen, there's no shower. There's one like shared bathroom, that's pretty gross. It's definitely pretty rough. Like, I'm living out of my car as far as like clothes in the trunk, going to the gym to shower, and eating out of a microwave or the fridge, like my mini fridge. And that is where I moved to out of South Central, because I knew I needed to keeping my overhead low, so I could keep going through any like really low or slow points in my career.
That is John McLucas. This week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to another episode here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. My name is Ian, and I am the host here on the Do It For Yourself podcast, where each week I have the opportunity to sit down with someone who is chasing a dream. They are working on their goals, and they are doing all of this because it is something that they want to do. It's not something that people are telling them that they have to do, and it is not something that is their plan B. They have no plan B. This is what they want to go for, and this is what they want to chase. This week, my guest is no different. My guest is John McLucas, and John is a freelance music producer, and he is working primarily in the pop music space. And when John started his journey, he was actually living out of this warehouse where he had his studio contained, just constantly working and building this dream, up to the point where today he obviously does not have or he is not living out of this warehouse studio anymore, in a very probably sketchy situation. But he now has his own studio that he is working out of, which is where he actually is still living, but just a little bit of a different circumstance now. So I'm really looking forward to bringing this interview to you. This is definitely something that's a little bit different, something that I haven't typically had in the past on the podcast, but I am really excited to share it with you. So without further ado, here is my interview with John McLucas. All right, man. Well, then let's get rocking and rolling.
Let's go.
I'm really looking forward to this because you definitely have a pretty gritty do-it-for-yourself story, for one, given, your background of being in the studio. And so I'm really looking forward to kind of building your story up until that point and then getting into where you went after that and how you have built up your career as a producer and everything. But John, I just want to say thank you so much for jumping on with me tonight. I'm really looking forward to getting into your story, and even just talking in the pre-show and stuff. I was really vibing with you on a lot of different stuff. So I think this is going to be a really awesome conversation.
Me too, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So just for the listeners who are tuning in, give me a little bit about your music producing career and a little bit about what you're doing right now. You said before we started recording that you just wrapped up a remote session. So talk to me a little bit about what you're doing.
So my full-time job, or that makes it sound like a 9 to 5. My career is producing pop music mostly, so producing and mixing. So working with mostly independent artists, And today's session was just a really simple, I brought some gear over to film a little live piano and vocal performance that I also recorded to create some content for them, for their online channels, and kind of promo stuff for their future releases. So, anything I do might range from something simple like that to, having just vocals and the artist comes to me so I can create the entire sonic universe around the core of the song, which is usually their lyrics and melody. So I'll be, writing drum parts, bass parts, all the synths, all the guitars, helping arrange it all, adding the transitions and every sound effect that, whizzes by in a song that you don't necessarily catch. You just know you like how it feels. That's what I'm responsible for.
And so on a day-to-day basis, I know that you said your kind of main job is doing that. On a day-to-day basis, is that what you're doing? You're recording stuff for some of your clients that you're working with, or you are sitting in the studio and mixing things together, creating different tracks as far as different instruments go. What's your day-to-day look like, or is it never really the same?
Well, there's a couple kind of iterations. So probably about 30% of the time now I have the clients in person with me. So that would involve more kind of back and forth, kind of that constant quick feedback loop where, I'm tossing ideas at the wall, or maybe we have, because, we'll start with the conversation of like, okay, so maybe give me some reference songs and tell me about the inspiration behind this and how do you want this song to feel emotionally, and give me some adjectives to describe the sounds that you're looking for, and we'll start there and then kind of build into that. So it's like reverse engineering what they're looking for at the end. And I'll even do that the same with the remote work that I do, but it can kind of alternate between those two things. So I might have somebody here one day, and then I'm working with a client over in Atlanta the next day, and then I'm mixing something for, a band upstate. So I'm California, so, upstate for me, like a few hours north the next day, and I'll be mixing their songs that they sent me. And, so it could kind of be a variety of those things, but almost all of it is in the chair I'm sitting in right now. That's the one common denominator.
Which is, it's actually in your house. Your studio is based out of your house. And so this doesn't really look like the typical studio that you've seen, in some of these YouTube videos and everything else. Because the thing that I was picturing when we first got in touch was, I'm picturing this giant, now, I mean, please forgive me, but my only frame of reference for a studio per se is a rap studio, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking like, when I'm picturing you and what you're doing, I'm picturing you sitting in front of this giant fucking board with all these dials and like sliders, and there's huge speakers, and there's a booth in front of you. Like, it's completely soundproof, right? So that was my image in my head. And it's completely not that at all.
Oh,
maybe a little bit.
Yeah, it is definitely not. I mean, so I'll tell you, in the pop world, there is such a massive amount of music being made, out of bedrooms and out of home studios, because so much of what is happening is coming out of the computer. So a lot of people, I think about like the Billie Eilish record is a great example of that. Like, they did everything out of their family bedroom, and you can create a major release and a majorly successful release with very, very little minimal equipment. So yeah, there's, to me, I don't understand the point of having a larger studio. Like, I mean, I understand it in a sense, but I think for the working class full-time music producer, it doesn't make sense, because there is, even, if you're super busy every day, and I'm very fortunate to be able to say that, there's very irregular cash flow, just depending on when a project may complete, or, maybe a project gets delayed 2 months. And so you might have a booked calendar, but the when the money comes in is so unpredictable that having a lot of overhead can be extremely suffocating and extremely nerve-wracking at the same time. So I've gone the route of keeping it really minimal and just focusing on the results that I get. And, I make my studio, my living room studio, look good. I want it to be obviously a good feeling for everybody, but, people have even asked me about that. It's like, John, why don't I have a larger space? And it's like, well, I would feel bad because, I'd have to charge you an extra $150 for just literally keeping the lights on. Like, that would be the only value it would add. And like, I guess more of the experience. But, the rap scene with those consoles, nobody's using the board. They're literally putting their laptop on the giant consoles and then plugging it into the speakers. Like, it's literally just a vibe thing. And unless you're on, a high end of the game financially, that's just not super feasible. So I would rather kind of save that overhead cost and pass that savings onto the, my clients, instead of kind of just having to price myself at this extra high point because I got to pay my rent. I don't think that's like necessarily a good value proposition to the client. So I keep it lean over here.
Well, and I guess the other thing that you would be kind of putting out at this point right now is, if you had that giant space, you'd be like putting up this false bravado. You'd be like making it seem like, like, oh yeah, I got this big space. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, well, it's almost extra, like you were saying. It's just extra, and then you're going to have to charge people extra. And it's like, but what are you charging people extra for? Is it really bringing them that much more value, or are you just doing it to keep up with the Joneses and put on this false front of like, well, I have to have this to make good music? Does it really make that much better music?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't want to dismiss like the things that and the sounds that can come out of rooms like that. I think there's definitely times for it, but because okay, there's a lot of good points that you just brought up. So there's the first facet of, yeah, I think if you are a pop musician, I don't think inherently the product will be any better if I'm sitting in this room compared to me sitting in a room with a big console. At the end of the day, nobody's listening to Sheck West and being like, I'm so glad he recorded that on an on an 80 U87 instead of the Sony C800. Like, nobody cares at all. And that, like, so that's one facet where I don't think it's super valuable. I think it is valuable in certain situations, like if you're a full band or if you're looking to do live drums. Like, going to a nice acoustic space for the sound of the drums in the room is really important. But then lastly, speaking to your point about, it is kind of like this bravado, like that's why it makes sense in the rap world, because rap is inherently about the flex. So if I was in the rap game and coming up there, I would honestly probably consider it more, because I know how much guys want to flex when they're in the studio, in the rap world. Like, that's part of it. And being able to flex that you're in this like dope spot, that it's like, I don't know, it puts on that image, and all the ice renting and Lambo renting and girl renting that goes on. It's kind of like part of the culture of that genre.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And but what's it all for? You know what I mean? Is it really creating a better content? I don't know. Like, I guess you'd have to ask the person who is creating the content, do they feel like they're going to produce something better out of that space? Now, I can say that I was just listening to something that another podcaster was talking about, and they were talking about how when it comes to like editing or doing really anything surrounding their podcast, they have to go somewhere else to do it, because if they try to do it at home, they can't do it. And I mean, I've heard that a zillion times, not even just in people working on podcast stuff, but like, people who work from home. That's the reason why a lot of people can't work from home, is because they don't get it done. They start doing laundry or cleaning the kitchen or vacuuming, and they're not doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. So I could see how, on the flip side of that, having a dedicated studio space to go to get the work done could also be beneficial.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's definitely not an easy self-discipline to be able to work from home and be effective and productive and conduct business, and then in the same space later, like, hang out with my girl and, do like couple things or just like relax. It's definitely a thing that takes a lot of like discipline, and I can definitely see the appeal, and it's something I've thought about before. But I'm in Los Angeles, and the price of that liberty is a no.
Yeah.
It's an insane income. It's an insane tax bracket that I'd have to be in before I would invest in a space like that. But until then, I'd rather be the lean production machine and keep everybody in my circle happy and myself happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, just one more note on that before we start like tracing back your story. I can't even fathom what the cost of Joe Rogan's studio is. Like his new one, I don't even know what the square footage of it is, but he has an entire archery shooting range in there.
That's amazing.
And that's just one of the things that he has. Like he's got a full gym. He's got this giant space where they actually record the podcast. Like I just can't even fathom what his cost is, but. Then again, on the other side of it, I don't think he's really too worried about it either. So, hey, it's all good.
Yeah. Cheers to him for being able to pull that off.
Right? Absolutely. So I want to track it back just a little bit and talk about how you got into music. So you were kind of in bands when you were in high school. You started playing instruments at a pretty young age. Talk to me about your introduction into music and how you became interested in it and how you really got sucked in.
Yeah, so it started with my mom when I was 10. She told my sister and I, pick an instrument, you're going to learn it. And not the most romantic start into music, but she's like, you're going to learn it, you're going to try it. If you don't like it, then you can stop, but you should try it. So I picked the drums. Two lessons later, she buys a drum kit for myself. I guess, I don't even remember my first 2 lessons, but I guess they went well, and I must have been stoked because buying a 10-year-old a drum set is no light commitment. But it worked out well. It's the same kit I actually have today, and I've taken it on tour, and I've taken it all over the place. So it's definitely paid itself off. And from there, I just start playing in bands and kind of had this realization that like I took it a lot more seriously than the rest of my bandmates. And so I kind of started feeling that divide a bit. And then from there, I really wanted to kind of take it more seriously, like in a business, like maybe I can make this a thing. Of course, any kid in high school is like, yeah, I can make music my career. It's pretty lofty. The conversion rate from thinking it can happen to having it happen it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So from there, I decided to attend the Musicians Institute's audio program, which I don't know how familiar you are with like audio school in general or some of the thoughts around like music schools.
No, so I was going to ask just right off the bat, like how long of a program that is. Is it a 2-year program, 4-year program? Like what's the structure of that?
So it's actually a certificate program. So there's only 2 quarters at its foundation. I think they've removed it because they want more money, and I think they're just stretching it out longer.
Naturally.
Shout out.
Yeah.
But yes, there's only a 6-month core program, and they had 2 3-month extensions on top of that. And I did one of them for post-production, working on films and stuff, which did pay off. Like I've done not a ton, but some work on like feature films and some Foley editing and dialogue mixing and all that kind of work. And but yeah, so it's a really quick program, and honestly, it's all you need. Like I definitely don't think it's at all necessary, and I don't honestly think it's a good fit for a lot of people to go to get formal training in audio. I think people are much better just interning or just going to YouTube and online education tools like Unstoppable Recording Machine and like and just learning from that and going to the open mics and inviting 4 bands from the open mic over to record for 2 hours each and start, building a portfolio. And like you can start a career just by getting to know people. So it's definitely not anything I'd consider mandatory, like audio school.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in the realm of, content and kind of just unfortunately, one of my other vices from time to time is getting sucked down a YouTube hole. And obviously, if you've ever watched a YouTube video, I'm sure at one point or another you've come across a Casey Neistat video.
Of course.
And I became like virtually obsessed with him. I just think he's a really cool dude, and I think he does some really cool stuff. He's not 100% the best editor, but he does create some cool content, and his whole 368 movement is just I think it's really cool, but that's a complete side note. Anyway, my point was everyone always asks him where he went to film school, and he's like, I didn't go to film school. I literally just went and I bought a camera and I maxed out a credit card for the camera, and then after I maxed out that credit card, I was like, well, I got to edit this. So then he went out and maxed out another credit card to get his iMac to start editing these videos. So it is interesting that in order to do some of these things, you don't necessarily have to go to some sort of formal training like in a school setting. There's so many things that you can learn online. There's so many courses that you can take that are online that don't require this huge financial investment. And I think that's really important in the times that we're in right now, because I think there's a lot of people who are getting hip to the fact that you don't have to go to a 4-year university or a 2-year program, spend boatloads of money to learn the things that you want to learn. There's a lot of being able to learn on the job nowadays. And I'll be interested to see, over the next 10, 15, 20 years, how that impacts these formal, 4-year universities for things that outside of the realm of, being a lawyer, being a doctor, being, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's going to have a massive effect, because I think more and more I'm like you say, I'm seeing people get more value out of an online program that's $20 a month than the $80,000 that Full Sail is going to cost for a 4-year degree. And they're getting careers faster, and they're getting better careers, and more bigger networks in those 4-year periods than they'd be doing otherwise. And it's like there's just like I don't know, it's slowly becoming obsolete, and especially with the amount of debt that a lot of people are taking on in order to do it, that's the really scary thing to me. It's like going 6 figures into debt to learn how to do audio, when it's like you could come intern for me, and I'll teach you it all for free. And that's a whole different story. But like, if you can go be valuable to somebody, they will give you time to mentor you back. And like, that's a much better path to go than going way into debt to learn these skills. And like, to be honest, a lot of the stuff I learned in audio school, I also had to unlearn after school, just in the sense of like, how do I say it? In the sense of, something like audio is it's so fluid, and it's so not black and white answer that it's hard for a school to maybe put that kind of thing into a curriculum. And then, you kind of learn all these black and white ways to do something that's so gray. And, so it's like, I feel like I even had to go through a whole thing about unlearning things from my time there. So I don't know. I think for a lot of people it may not be a good fit. For me, it worked out well. That's how I got into touring, and all that stuff was through that school. So I can't hate on it. Like, it did its job. But not for many people, I'd say.
So you wrap up this program, and where do you go once you're done the program? Do you have an idea of where you want to go and where you want to take this? Or do you just start trying and testing things, tasting different things, seeing what you like and what works for you?
I mean, I think I'm still very much in the tasting phase in a lot of ways, like maybe in the more macro tasting, but like, so after I stopped going to school, I did that program, and then I did a couple quarters of like part-time and learning some more stuff with instruments while I was kind of freelancing. And then then I pick up a gig that is like 2 solid weeks of recording this album. And then that's kind of when I'm like, all right, I'm going to stop going to school because it's during the quarter, and hopefully I never have to sign up for school again. So, like, that's like how I know my career's going well, if I don't have enough time to sign back up for school. So that was kind of my barometer of success. And then when I was away on that project, I got hit up by this band that I'd auditioned for and didn't actually get the spot to start to join them and to tour with them. And so the school has like an audition thing a process you can go through. It puts you on a short list of like roster people for opportunities that then you go back and audition for those specific things. So I went through that, did a couple auditions, and then they hit me up when I was out on that album. And then that started me going into touring. So I hadn't really anticipated going on tour at all when I finished, but I, of course, was not going to turn away the opportunity to learn that side of the business. And, because I'm a drummer at heart, and that's, of course, why wouldn't I want to be in a band that's touring and has all these things going for them?
Yeah, I mean, as a drummer, I'm sure that was probably, one of your dreams to be able to do that. So what was that experience like?
It's really interesting. Like, it happened at a very good time because I didn't have anything really established here in a sense of like my own career. And I think if I did, I wouldn't have, because the return on the investment is so low. And, without saying their names, not like they're going to listen to this. They don't like me. And I'm not particularly into them at all, as, just on a personal level as humans. I think okay, I came into this situation and I was a lot newer to it all. I hadn't toured, I was kind of getting taken under their wing. And so I took a lot of what they said as gospel. And I learned a lot through those 2 years I was with them. And I think learned a lot by going on a lot of bad tours and, watching them make a lot of, looking back, very bad decisions as a business and as a band, and looking at like how to use our time and all of that stuff. So, and then I toured in another band later, just as a hired gun for a few runs with them. But even just from those experiences, being on the road multiple times in different bands and formations and situations, touring is fantastic in a lot of ways, but it's probably one of the worst ways to be spending your time, if I'm going to be completely frank. I have a video about this on my YouTube channel, plug-in, but it's really just like a matter of math, as well as the fact that like people think they'll be resourceful on like their phones or on their laptops, on the drives, and it's just like not feasible unless you're in a bus maybe, but I've never toured in a bus. It's been a 15 passenger van or an SUV pulling a trailer, and it's just like exhausting and cramped and mind numbing, and then you're on this complete high for 30 minutes and then back to mind numbing, and your body's aching from hauling gear, and you're sleeping 2 hours one night, then you're like getting shafted by I don't know. There's a lot of really grueling things, and not to say that I didn't enjoy a lot of touring or a lot of time on the road, but I think a lot of people romanticize touring for the experience instead of looking at it practically in the business sense, for what it actually brings you. And I think there's just vastly better ways to be spending your time. Like what I've done on the internet in the last 6 months has done more for me as far as like creating a tour just as John McLucas than all of the tours I've done. Like as far as making connections and deep, meaningful connections with people all over the internet, like yourself, like you're somebody that if I came, into New York, I could possibly entice to come out, not for a show, but like if I just was there, like to hang out and meet people, like these connections happen more through the internet and with less grueling pain than going on the road, and all of the expenses from the time, gas, miles, mental health problems, physical health problems with being in a car all day, eating worse food, irregular hygiene practices by, not everybody, but some people, like all of that cumulatively, I realized was just not worth it after a couple years. Like I literally had the best of my life on tour, opening for Tool, Coheed, and Primus, which was insane. But like at the end of it, in the macro, it just wasn't a great ROI for my time, to be honest. And I look back on it fondly, but I just value my time too much to be on the road.
So it starts to become clear that it's time for you to make a transition out of this touring phase of your life. And for the reasons that you just listed there, what do you start to consider? What starts to kind of open up for you, or what starts to grasp your interest as far as making a transition into something new, something different, but still in this field of audio?
Yeah. Well, I will say really quick, I don't want to definitely say that the touring part of my life is completely closed, but because I did, have an opportunity that ended up not panning out because the tour got canceled, but opportunity to be a hired gun drummer for this band. And there's definitely opportunities where it does make sense, not even from a financial standpoint, but there's some fairly internet influential people in that band. And, we were discussing the possibility of like trading some payment within shout outs from these insanely large creators, that would be very substantial as far as like what that would do for my own online personal brand. But, so it's not something that's completely off the table, but it's definitely something that's not A1 priority. Because so I wanted to invest more in myself, and the expectation of the band at the time was like the band is number one. And they had sugar mamas supporting them. So they didn't have to do anything to make money. And I'm not like that. So I need money. And the whole time I was doing freelance audio, but it's kind of hard to do both. And nurture both things when they're both so demanding and have such sporadic schedules. So I took the leap and left that band in February 2017 to go full ham into my audio, attempts, I guess, we'll call it. And I just knew I had to double down on something for myself. And after my experience with them, I'm like, I know I can trust myself to execute, and relying on other people can be just way too risky, and way too complicated at times. And I just know, like, yeah, I'll execute. I'll figure it out. I'm confident in my skills, and I'm going to make it happen. Like, no question.
So you start to go all in on this, and where are you living at the time, and what was your first move that you made? Like, did you have a studio space, or did you get a studio space? Did you set up a studio space in the place where you were living? Kind of take me through these first initial steps of, okay, I'm going to go all in on this, but here's where I'm going to start, and these are the things that I need to do to get started, to go all in.
Yeah. So at the time I was living in South Central Los Angeles, which you may have heard from 90s rap songs. And I decided to do that because I needed really low overhead, because I decided to move in there when we were about to do this 4-week run tour, when our album's supposed to drop on this label and blah, 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 blah. And then it all fell apart, and then I left in February. But I was still there till September, so I had about 7 months in the hood. So I just, did my best to spruce up how my bedroom could look, and I started throwing my bed up against the wall and ran this curtain around it from floor to ceiling this ghetto curtain. There I hung hooks from the ceilings and got Joann's fabrics and kind of hung it, so it just looked not like somebody slept in that space. So it just looked like a spare bedroom that might be used for a studio, kind of. Yeah, and so that's pretty much where I started as a producer, was out of this 4-bedroom duplex in South Central Los Angeles with bars on the windows, and that's what I had. And I just, you start trolling Craigslist and hitting people up and seeing what they need, and what can you do to help make their life better, and reaching out to everybody through the school and my previous leads and trying to scrape together a living, because that's all I had at that point. So that's my OG spot, and I'll never forget, what the role that place played in the journey, for sure.
And so you're working as a freelancer, and you at this point are literally just scouring the internet and anywhere that you possibly can to find clients who need some sort of help with their audio or production side, or were you particular about what you were taking, or were you just taking on any sort of jobs that you could in order to make money, with the ultimate goal to get out of South Central?
Yeah, honestly, it was just money, anything I can do to get paid, make a new client, meet a new client, start some kind of new connection and something like that. I was in. There's no question about it. And I think I had an interesting conversation with somebody who I was, who possibly was thinking to intern for me but didn't, is I think it's important that if you are in a place where you are not in demand, to not be picky about the circumstances and the opportunities that you can get. Because me doing ADR for web series is not my dream. But you know what? It's more my dream than, having to get a regular job. And you never know who you're going to meet through what, and like what that could turn into and all that kind of stuff. So I literally just took anything I possibly could and ran with it. As well, I did have 2 years from touring, and being still home most of the year, that I was working freelance through people like from the school, like students, and putting together like really low budget projects to kind of get started. So I did have a baseline of clients. I just didn't quite, I wasn't necessarily the best businessman because it's definitely a learning curve that they do not teach you in school, like how to navigate your own business. So from there, I really just had to focus on learning what it meant to be a service provider at its very core, and how to people.
And where did you go to? Where did you turn to get the information on how to do that? Did you go to the internet? Did you talk to people who were already in the industry, who were already doing this, who could maybe offer you some help, or was it a mixture of the two?
Yeah, so definitely a mixture of the two. I'd say there's a couple of really good online resources. The Unstoppable Recording Machine is a great audio community of people that I really enjoyed, as well as the Six Figure Home Studio, which is, what it sounds like. It's a home studio business company that gives just so much good knowledge and information away. You can kind of imagine it's like the top 5 business books of the world, just condensed down for producers, and they change all the words out to just, like say producer, instead of just like general information. And those 2 resources were super helpful, as well as YouTube in general. But I'd say it's like taking those bits and then figuring out how to apply it directly in my situation, and a lot of trial and error, because I think there's so much that's really fluid, or, I think more than anything, experience has been my best teacher, even if that means like screwing up a relationship with a client and burning a bridge, which I've definitely done, a couple times that I can remember at least, and learning from those experiences and hopefully coming out a better person in the end. So I'm a big fan of, running and learning along the way instead of getting too overly educational with it. I was like getting in there.
And so you start taking on some of these projects that you're finding, online and elsewhere. How long were you utilizing and sleeping out of this little makeshift studio, 1-bedroom space that you had before you did get out of South Central? And did you push it a little bit longer just to make sure that you were going to be okay when you did leave South Central?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So after I left, that was like me living in my bedroom at the time, and after that, I did actually move into like an industrial, or I don't know, like how much like deep musician knowledge you might have. So there's like these complexes, or like maybe these warehouse units that are they're just like boxes that bands can rehearse in. It's like rehearsal studios. And a lot of producers will use them because it's, a space you can be loud in 24/7, which you can't do in all areas. So after South Central, I ended up moving into one of those, which was definitely like a new thing for me. And I was literally living on the floor of like, I don't know, I guess just living on the floor of this 152 square foot box that was my studio and my home. And it was definitely illegal. And I can only talk about it now because I don't live there anymore. And I'm not.
Were you renting this space, or like how did that work? It was your space, correct?
Yeah, so I rented it out as a studio.
Okay.
And then I just had a foam pad on the ground and I would sleep on that. Which, got the job done, I guess. It definitely wasn't, a luxurious life because, I'm showering at the, there's no shower. You got literally imagine like a 16 by 9.5 foot rectangle. And that was my studio and my home. So I got, sold a lot of just general possessions and comforts that a lot of people don't think they can get rid of. Like, there's no windows, there's no kitchen, there's no shower. There's one like shared bathroom, that's pretty gross. It's definitely pretty rough. Like I'm living out of my car as far as like clothes in the trunk, going to the gym to shower and eating out of a microwave or the fridge, like my mini fridge. And that is where I moved to out of South Central because I knew I needed to keeping my overhead low, so I could keep going through any like really low or slow points in my career, because they do happen, and I wanted to not be the victim of me having a really high, like we talked about, like if I rented a big studio, I'd have to be nervous about like covering $4 or $5 grand a month to have like a massive console space, and I didn't want to have that. I just wanted to be able to reinvest everything I possibly could, and I definitely made a lot of big sacrifices to do so, but I felt like it was the best choice for me at the time, for sure.
Well, and it kind of goes full circle, because when you hear and see some of these videos, of the rappers or even some other people who are utilizing a studio space, they'll be in there like all night long. And so even though it wasn't the image that you were going for, you were sleeping in your studio and really just grinding it out at this point, so that you could make it.
Yeah. And it's the stuff that like people don't think about for sure when it comes to like, what it means to grind, but it's, especially in Los Angeles, like it's much more common than people think. Like in these really high rent locations, like you have to get creative because, otherwise, because back in South Central I was living with friends, but when I wanted to move out for other reasons, but like I wanted to be into a different space. But if I was going to even share a room with somebody and then have this separate studio space, like that's still a lot of overhead to be taking on for a new business that has an unreliable baseline of income. Like, and I wasn't booked out, like a month in advance. So I didn't have that like set consistent demand yet. So it's just too scary. Like I didn't want to take that on, and I nearly ran out of money that year. So I'm glad I did that, because that's the only way I didn't go into debt.
And so, I want to be respectful of your time. I know that we do have to jump off soon. So can you take me from this 16 by 9 room briefly to where you are today, and kind of a little bit about how you got there?
So I think it's a few things, and I'll say first off, it's like sad, but it's truly sacrificing like friends and fun for the majority of those 11 months. There's definitely days where like I wouldn't really talk to any humans, because I might wake up, go to the gym, so I can shower and get a workout in and come back, and I would kind of forget to leave, maybe besides going to the bathroom. And it's literally just working an insane amount, and continuing to learn new things, like constantly self-educating. And by self-education, it could be like online education, but you still have to, yourself has to take the time to digest it, and elect to do it. So I think I worked an insane amount of hours, but I was also self-educating myself a lot, and I had really changed my mindset as far as like how much money can I get to how much, super Gary V, but like how much value can I provide to my client? How easy can I make their life? And what is really motivating them as a musician? Like what do they want their ideal end result to be? And then working backwards from that. Because if I was just a producer or, a guy who recorded bands, that's a commodity. And then it comes down to price and gear list. And I knew I would lose that battle because I didn't have a gear list. Like I didn't have a sick gear list, but I knew I was creative. And if I could position myself as a creative service provider, that had a lot more value and it wasn't tied to the equipment on my desk. So that's kind of where I tried to position myself, and it ended up working. So between that working just too many hours, self-educating, and spending a lot of time with people who shared the same values that I did. Like you and I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I feel like we are on the same page with how, we approach like connecting with people and, having a helping first mentality. That's definitely where I cultivated, like my approach to that is in the walls of that studio.
And I am with you 100% there. I have really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm sad that we have to end it. But I do want to just take a minute to first say thank you for getting connected with me and coming on the podcast. I'm thrilled that we were able to share your story with some of the listeners here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. So I want to ask you just one last thing, and that is, what does it mean to you, John, to be doing it for yourself? And then just to save some time, when you are finished with that thought, let everybody know where they can get connected with you, and we will be good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I got a hot I might have a bit of a meaty, lengthy answer. Oh my goodness, might have a bit of a lengthy answer for this, but I have so many good things to say about what doing it for yourself means to me, at least. Because I'll say I'm really I'm stupid fortunate that I have had the parents that I've had, and this loops back, I promise. And they've instilled in me very much the foundation that becomes the, doing it for yourself mindset. They've been incredibly supportive, but beyond that, I think it's realizing that no matter, you've cursed on this podcast, right? So it's fine? Okay,
yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'll make sure. So no matter what piece of shit people you have in your world that might be influencing you to try to control you, that there's no, there's never any good ending to that narrative, because there's never a point of satisfaction where a manipulative demon is going to be satisfied with how much they've manipulated you to live for them and for their own happiness. And it absolutely breaks my heart when I have seen so many amazing creative people live that way, where they aren't doing it for themselves. They're doing it because of a family pressure, or they're something that their grandma said to them when they were 6 and they still can't get out of their head. And it breaks my heart, because there's never any good ending to that story. And for me, doing it for yourself, or for myself, is just having the confidence and the belief that, and the knowledge that I am valuable, and that I can provide something really beneficial to people, and that I can so fucking cheesy. I can do whatever I want. But it's just true. I can't, there's so many pointless examples of when it is true, how you can really do anything that you want. I mean, we can get into systemic issues and all of that, but I forgot maybe it was a Gary Vee thing, but it's if there's somebody who looks like you that's succeeded or has been in your circumstance and has triumphed it, it truly is possible. Especially in 2019, there is more opportunity than ever for people of every background and every situation to succeed and do something. And so doing it for yourself is literally just the least you can do for yourself. Because I think it's a massive act of self-love, and it's honestly the best feeling in the world. And also, I don't want to bash working a 9-to-5 job, because I think a lot of people here do it for yourself and they think it's oh, well, I'm doing it for the man if I'm working a corporate job. It's no, you have to make sacrifice sometimes to do it for yourself, and that sacrifice, is working a job you don't like for financial stability. My sacrifice was living like a homeless person for 11 months, but those are still acts of doing it for yourself. It's all about in the time that you have available to work towards the things you want for yourself, and to not beat yourself up over other circumstance that you're working towards progressing on, or that you are progressing on. And I don't have any great way to wrap up this meandering rant, so I'm just going to get self-aware in the end of my rant, And now this is the end of my sentence. What was the last? And then you said do one more thing, and I totally forgot.
Where can people connect with you?
The plug. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So hit me up on the Instagram, which is at John_McLucas, JOHN_M as in Mary, CLUCAS. I could do this professionally. Or you can just go and add me on Facebook. I have one of those Facebook like pages, but I literally put it on a banner like, don't use this page. Go add my personal one. I did it just so I could get like advanced metrics on Instagram. Those two things. And then on YouTube, I've been popping off on YouTube, putting in a lot of content to be entertaining and valuable to people, and putting in some, not gonna lie, pretty solid bits, comedy bits into the stuff that I'm creating. So I think it is more than worth a subscribe, and you can just, I'm totally cool if you want to go like watch all the videos and stuff. Like, it's fine. Just have a field day with it. Other than that, that's about it. Hit me up on my website, johnmclucas.com. If you need a business thing, you can hear the stuff that I've created and see the pretty juicy website I've made. And that's about all I got to plug this today. Thank you so much, Ian.
Dude, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to blasting this episode out there.
Boom!
So that is my interview with John McLucas. And I would just like to tip my hat to John for his never quit attitude. There were so many times where the going got tough, and John definitely could have thrown in the towel and just said, you know what, forget it. This isn't for me. But that's what doing it for yourself is all about. You are going to stop at absolutely nothing to reach this goal that is very, very important to you. So hats off to John for doing that, and hats off to the rest of the guests on this podcast who have also done, something very similar. If you would like to support the show, you enjoyed this episode or one of the many episodes that we have here, do me a favor and just tell a friend. Word of mouth is going to be the easiest way to help this podcast grow, and I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. You can also leave a review on the Apple Podcast app or wherever it is that you are getting your podcasts. And if you would like to support the show here financially and help us get some new equipment, maintain the storage space, the bandwidth, etc., that can be done at patreon.com/do-it-for-yourself. So thank you so much again for tuning in this week, and I look forward to seeing you next week.